Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Anthony Washington Sr. coming to you from Facilitate the Process. Yes, I've been talking about facilitating the process for a while, right? And I've done many of things, career and professional development, um, college athletic recruiting. You pretty much name it. I've done quite a few of those things, right? But with facilitating the process, we always talk about, we always hit trust the process, right? And we've been saying for a while that, sometimes we have to evolve that thinking, right? So we talk about trusting the process, but how can these kids growing up nowadays, right? And even some of the adults who are now in the plus 10 or plus 20 more years of their life, right? How can they continue to trust a process that was built for a different generation, or it was built for it was time period, right? So at some point, these processes, they have to evolve. And when we talk about that evolving, sometimes it has to deal with things such as adversity, right? So when those processes aren't evolving, are they teaching us how to prepare for adversity and things like that? And we'll be right back with you in a second. So we're back. So what you briefly saw was basically the definition of adversity. So there's nothing more adverse than dealing with situations when you get hit with something that has to be done right now, or you have to change right now. Are we really prepared for this? Are we preparing the kids for this? A lot of these kids haven't had to live through a lot of trauma, right? Sometimes we shield them, right? So, and y'all know usually I don't script a lot of things, but I had some notes that disappeared on my system today. You'll see on the bottom for the website. I hit the wrong button this morning. I was working till about 6 o'clock. So please go to the website, facilitatetheprocess.com. Click in the upper right, you'll see the countdown timer. I think it's like at 8 or 9 days now. So go down to the bottom and sign up for our updates, and we're going to be pushing out a lot of information. So the question I had was, why should someone trust a process that others have trusted throughout the years? So why should they trust it? So it's simple. So times have changed. We have coaches blowing up at the media, publicly downing student athletes, but these kids are recruited by these coaches or recruited by, let's say, the employer, right? We have pro athletes that are getting in trouble with the law, et cetera. That's nothing new, right? They're adults. They are people. They are human, right? But the process doesn't care. So that's why the process needs to evolve. It's not about the process doing all the work, because when people trust the process, automatically they say that it's something that's there for them to do and that that's what they should be doing. I'm here to say that that's not actually what they should be doing. If we are going to be facilitating this whole thing about facilitating the process, we have to show them what process needs to be done and how the process is to be carried out, if that makes sense. We can't continue to rely on them looking at past things that were being done. Do we still tell student athletes to watch what they're posting on social media? Yes, because that is still part of the process. That part of the process is never going to change. It's going to be static, right? But the dynamic portion of that is the way things are being posted now, the severity of the things that are being posted, the way they communicate on social media. That's what's been dynamic. That's what has been changing over the years with the different way that people name their handles or whatever, their Twitter handles or usernames. It used to be, you could use just your regular name sometimes, and that was good enough. Now you have to put something catchy. You want to catch people's eye. You have things where people are putting, they have certain titles that you wouldn't want people to read, right? They use, maybe some perceived curse words or things in their titles, something like that, right? So those are the things that change it. But as far as telling them watch how they communicate on social media, yes, that's still the same. But we have to do more than just tell them. And yeah, we've been saying it for years. We've been saying the same thing over and over again. Hey, that's just part of the process, saying it over and over and over again, right? But let's start teaching them the steps. We teach them the steps. If they still do it at that point, guess what? That's called growing pains. They're going to learn at some point. Then they're going to get older and they're going to start saying, hey, I know I messed up, but I want you to do this. So it's not a cookie cutter approach. It's not one size fits all, right? So it's time to accurately facilitate what the process is and what it's not. So we see a lot in the biggest part I wanted to talk about the adversity part is when coaches get asked certain questions. Now, we all know certain coaches get asked certain questions by members of the media, and some coaches, they won't even dare ask those kind of questions, right? But let's talk about in the world of college athletics. The student athletes that you're recruiting are high school kids. They're kids. You know, for lack of a better term, we want to say that they're growing up and they're going to find their way, right? But you're recruiting kids. You're not, and some adults still act in some of those ways, right? But you're recruiting kids. So you can't come back and then talk about how these are kids. These are kids. You recruited these kids based upon their athletic ability, right? Hopefully you use some of their academics as part of that as well, right? But you recruited these student athletes. So you can't come back and then say, this is not, this is who they are or whatever, because you recruited them. So when we talk about trusting the process, what is that kid supposed to trust now? Because they're hearing you talk in the media and they're hearing you say certain things and they felt like, well, that's not how coach talked to me when he was in my living room, he or she was in my living room, and they wanted to get me on their campus. Well, yeah, that happens, right? But the thing is this, you were told to trust the process. But where are the people at facilitating all those things in there? So that's where I would like to say that we come into this process, right? Being able to show coaches and student athletes and parents that, yeah, here is the process. Here's the way they used to do it, right? Some are still old school in their methods. But I'm here to tell you the methods have to change, because once adversity hits, once you have the coach has a losing season or their job may be on the line, guess who they have to rely on? They have to rely on the coaches on their staff. They have to rely on those student athletes that they just dogged out in an interview, and then they want them to come and play for them the next day. It's not like when you go into in some of the adult world, right? Regular employment, where you have to count on folks to do their job and have to count on them understanding that, yesterday you were hurt, the next day is a new day. Let's move on. Let's trust the process, right? No, it doesn't work that way when you're talking about kids. Some of these things can linger because you recruited a kid that came from a bad background, right? Came from I won't say maybe that's maybe a bad background, but came from a background that's less than conducive to where you want them at. You have to still build them up because they came from a background where somebody always beat them down. So why now as a coach, you're sitting in an interview and you're beating those same kids down? So you caused not only you're facing adversity as a coach because you may be on the verge of having a losing season or losing your job, and you're losing control in an interview. That's part of your adversity, and then you're down on your kids, and they're listening to your interview, coach. Don't think they're not listening. Parents, they're listening to you. They're listening to you in the stands when you're yelling out certain things, right? So they're already being hit and bombarded with so much. But we keep saying trust the process. We say this so much. So who's facilitating the next wave of this process? I mean, trust the process 2.0, 3.0, whatever you want to call it. Who's facilitating that? Who's teaching them how to do these things? So it's not just about the student athletes. It's about continuing to show the coaches that there is a different method, right? And there's a different way to reach a lot of these kids. And the old way is not the way to do it. You have to literally give them a step-by-step process of how to do it. And the problem is that everyone wants to use the same process. It just doesn't work that way. You can give it to them, yes, but you better be prepared to take your pen to paper, cross out, underline, highlight, do what you need to do. It's just like any other standard operating procedure. Sometimes you got to review it. Sometimes you got to make changes. If it still works, you roll with it. But we've proven time and time again that it's not working. Coaches are facing adversity and they're really lashing out. But certain coaches don't get asked certain questions by the media, right? So here's the thing. Having media credentials gets me in certain doors. Great. Would I ask a coach a tough question? Yeah, I'll ask a coach a tough question, right? But there's a certain level of respect that you still use when you're asking it. And some people in the media do ask questions that are redundant and you already know the answer to it, right? But having been on the other side as a coach, I still should not be responding in a way that, for one, forget the university, right? Or the job that I'm working for. I don't want to put myself in a bad light because there are going to be other things that I want to do after this, right? Now, have we all had rants that we've probably done online? Oh, yeah. I had a rant years ago. Someone called me up immediately. Hey, you need to take that down. Without hesitation, guess what? Took it down because at the moment, I didn't think. I was upset and I said what I said. Did I mean what I said? Yeah, but I shouldn't have put it out there in social media. That's the point. We put it out there in social media and then we want to take it back because in a couple of days, you're going to probably hear an apology from a coach about something they said. Just saying. But when they push that stuff out there, the kids are listening. We're still saying trust the process. From a recruiting standpoint, we're saying trust the process, right? If a kid is sitting home in that living room and they're watching this interview and they just listening to a profanity-laced conversation with the media, should that child want to play for that coach? As a parent, do I want my kid to play for that coach? That coach can be beloved all they want. I saw that one incident, that one interview. It's just like with anything else. One thing can derail the other 10 things that you've done. And what it used to say, it takes 5 or 10 good to pretty much equal out that one thing you did bad or that was perceived to be bad. And that's part of the problem. When we talk about the process is so much bigger than what many people really realize. And I'm going to play that quick video again in reference to adversity. So here goes the definition for adversity. That's going to jump up on the screen again, and that would make things a little bit clearer in reference to pretty much what we're talking about. The process is full of adversity. I mean, I don't think it gets any clearer than that. We're going to face adversity. The process is full of adversity, and I think that when we start to not hit that point, when we're talking to student athletes, when we're talking to parents, we're talking to new hires within your organization, because what we do all the time, like I said, we talk to student athletes, we talk to coaches, we talk to employers. So we know about a lot of these processes and these SOPs and these policies that are outdated and they're just not where they need to be at. So the process is not just about athletics. For coaches, there's a process and a procedure when you are interviewed by the media. So I mean, it is what it is. They can be millionaires all they want, but everyone forgets that they are still regular people. But they just figure because of who they are, it's always this is such and such, and they're just great. And okay, so what? I could care less. They don't pay my bills, right? They don't pay your bills. So you got to look at that process. That process, it starts from day one. When student athletes, when they start to want to figure out what they want to do, or if they want to even play a particular sport, how are they going about their daily day? How are they going about getting training? I watch a lot of trainers online teach some great things. I watch a lot of trainers teach them stuff that people are definitely calling them out on, right? But it's part of the process. So when are we going to start teaching the process in a particular way, right? So how are you going to handle it? I mean, you get an interview. If your student athlete sees how you react as a coach, as an employee, as a parent in an interview or something, right? Do you want them to respond the way you did? I mean, I think that's the biggest question. Do you want them to respond the way you did? Because the process says that they saw you, so they felt like it was okay to do. So then what did they do? They only mirrored what they saw you do. So kind of like that's where we come into play, and we're not trying to say coach or mom or dad or whoever the employee is. We're not saying you're not doing it right. What we're saying is we can enhance what you do, right? We can enhance part of your process. We will facilitate your process. Doesn't matter what you have. There is a way to say it and a way to do it. And sometimes it just takes a completely different voice, right? A lot of people, when sometimes people will say, oh, your teacher tell me how to parent. They're trying to teach me how to lead my people. They're trying to teach me how to coach. Tell me how to coach. That's not always the case. I think what the problem is that sometimes we get into this point where we don't like change, right? So all of this is a part of adversity, right? It's a situation that it's a change that we're just like it sometimes it hits you without you even knowing, right? You can wake up in the morning with adversity. You can get hit with adversity at the drop of a dime, right? But how would you handle it, right? And knowing the description, we talked about a little bit different, right? But that's just to get you to show that things can change on a dime. Someone can put a description of a live online about what something's going to be, and then we just can go off on a tangent, right? And we can start talking about all the different things because in your mind, it comes up. You're thinking exactly those same things. Once you start talking about adversity, and you're like, wow. You start talking about interviews of coaches and coaches blowing up in these interviews. They said in the NFL, don't press send, right? For emails. I mean, we don't always think sometimes the way we need to. It can come out wrong, right? But I would say when we're talking about facilitating the process, if you're going to get interviewed or you got a job coming up or you're going to be interviewed by the media after a game, and as a high school coach, they try to tell you, and we tell parents, don't try to approach us directly after the game, right? Because emotions are running high, especially after a loss. Emotions are running high, and you may just say some things. Anybody ever ask yourself why the media does it directly after a game? Well, let's be real. Sometimes it's about money, right? You're on TV, they have sideline reporters, they have all of that stuff. All of that is a part of that. And somewhere in there, it's a part of their contracts and stuff like that, right? But here's the thing. At the high school level, you don't want to be talking to a parent. You don't want a parent to come talk to you or have that access right after a game, especially a tough loss. So we talk about the process. As you go up the ladder in those positions or coaching or whatever, the access may not be so much there for the parent, but media-wise, it's there. You lose a game, you don't want to talk to the media right after the game because you just lost. And they're going to ask you questions about your roster, or they're going to ask you questions about what do you think you could have done better? And you're like, well, I could have won the game. And first of all, it's not, when, how they say the coach loses the game and when players win, your coach gives the credit to the players. The credit to the players. Players are the one that are making it all happen, right? But as a coach or employer, you're the one who recruits and sets these rosters, right? Or you hire them. So that's a whole nother story. So when we lose, we don't want to talk to the media. We don't talk to anybody. We don't feel like explaining anything. But when you win, have anybody ever noticed? When you win, oh, you want to talk to everybody. You want to shout, to the heavens. You want to tell everybody how everything worked and how everything came together, and we trusted the process. We want to do all that. But when we lose, we don't want to talk to anybody. It's like the worst thing in the world, right? Sometimes it's not a bad thing. We just need a little bit of a break in between talking to the media, or in between talking to the parents, or in between talking to your supervisor or whoever when a situation happens. Sometimes it doesn't cause for a right now effect. But this process that they have set up that's how they do it. And what's the saying that they always say? This is how we've always done it here. It's the wrong attitude. Yes, there are things where, this is the way we've always done it. But guess what? This is all how we've always done it here. But let me ask you a question. How can we improve it? How can we enhance it? How can we keep what you've had, but add a little bit more flavor, add a little bit more for the new breed, so to speak, right? Because let's face it, what we were doing 20 years ago, we're not doing now. There are policies sitting out there at jobs that 20 years old that don't equate to what we're doing right now with teleworking and training in a virtual world. So, I mean, that's just our 2 cents on that. But adversity, our student athletes are watching us. We, as parents, you have kids, and you always say they're watching, right? They watch everything you do, everything you say. Most kids, when they watch and they learn in their first words, if they hear you say a particular word all the time and it's a curse word, that's probably going to be maybe their first word, right? Because they're always listening. They're always listening, even when you think they're not listening, right? And what makes that any different from a student athlete or an employee who's listening to their coach or they're listening to their supervisor? If they always see that attitude or they hear that, this is what they're going to do. They're going to emulate that, right? So how are you going to handle it? Are you going to get mad with them because they're being you? You've shown them how to be. You blow up in an interview. You've just shown them how to be. Have you shown your true colors, or are you just really, really frustrated? And if you're really, really frustrated, you need to figure out how to change that. So the process has to change. You got to figure out what you're going to do differently, because your student athletes will emulate you. If you are that loudmouth coach or whatever, I mean, you want to take it personally, that's fine. If that's who you are, great. You're that yeller, great. You're that quiet person, great. But you tend to recruit those type of players for your program, however you want to see your program done. But your players, your kids, your employees, however you do things is how they're going to do it. So you got to remember that we're all going to face some type of adversity, but how you deal with it is what's going to set you apart from everybody else. So remember, trusting the process is not always the best thing to do. Processes can be need to evolve, especially given today's times. So let's start looking more towards facilitating the process and teaching people what the process is and how it can be improved.